Last summer, I was invited to a friend's house. He wanted me to come over and listen to two young entrepreneurs sort of do a dress rehearsal for a proposal they were going to make for a company. So along with a few other friends, we settled back in the living room of my friend's house and kind of got comfortable on the sofa, and we listened to these two young entrepreneurs, go at it. They had an idea, they had a technology around that idea, and they started talking about the marketplace and how the market would feed their idea. They started talking about the money they would need and maybe even how they would pay that money back. And then they started talking about the people that they wanted to hire for this company someday, and they even visualized the place it was going to be in. And I remember settling back on that sofa and thinking to myself, they are so playing house. Playing house, that's the term we use, right? When adults really don't behave like adults, when adults don't really have the knowledge that they really need, or maybe it's a naive perspective that we use to refer to that kind of behavior. They're playing house. Playing house was kind of fun, wasn't it? We remember the chairs that we used to put together and we used to string this blanket over the top and crawl inside, and it was Lawrence of Arabia, and we were there, right? Or if we were lucky enough to have our parents buy new appliances, we would take those big boxes and run to the backyard and start cutting holes in it and doors in it, and in the shadow of the big house, we would run our simulation of the little house, right? It was our simulation of life. We were playing house. And as was mentioned before today, it's so true, the ultimate expression was the tree house. And so we would borrow our father's tools, along with every other kid borrowing their father's tools, never to be seen again. And we would run around and borrow lumber from the community, never to be seen again. And we would build these tree houses, and if we were fortunate enough, we would have the kind with trapdoors in it, and we would climb up there, and we would shut those pesky parents out, and we would talk for hours about the literature of our time called comic books. And the literature would inform great discourse about how we would rule the world when we get to the time when we had control. I'd like to talk to you a little today about going from the playhouse to the boardroom and my journey back again. The year is 1962. This is a small school on the outskirts of Tokyo, Japan. My parents were teachers, missionary teachers. My father taught art to 350 kids, missionary kids, embassy kids, business kids, military kids. My mother taught home economics to the girls. That's before guys could do that. And interesting enough, this was the context of my childhood. A school that was central. We lived on the campus there. Farmers' fields around, mainly rice paddies, and bamboo forests. About half the kids that went to this school actually commuted. So you had about 150 or so coming by mass transit every day. And the reason I like this picture is because it reminds me that I grew up a minority. It was part of the context of who I was playing with and what I was thinking of when I was younger. It informed my playhouse days. Another kind of fun picture to me that I discovered recently was my older brother and my sister and I leaning against the family car. This is a Subaru 360cc. Most motorcycles in the village went faster than we could. And if you would imagine my parents in there with us, none of this, you're on my line, on the side of the seat, we were the seat. It was an incredible experience because leaning against this car, little did I know that this car would actually play a great part in informing my future. My mother knew that I really liked cars, and she saw this growing affinity for me with it. And because we didn't have curbside garbage pickup, we had to take the trash to the village dump twice a week. So my mother would say, "Nathan, will you come and help me?" Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Take the garbage to the dump. And as soon as we were out of the prying eyes of my sister and brother, I would get to drive. And I was in 6th grade. And so I would bound around, the rice paddies and enjoy myself. It was great fun. And that was the first car of my collection. These are the rest of the cars of my collection. This is actually my Matchbox car collection, and for those of you who are too young, Matchbox cars came before Hot Wheels, so there, you know. And Matchbox cars were important because they actually helped me understand that all cars weren't weird like the one we were driving in, and that I could visualize what a Rolls Royce must be like, and I could visualize what a Jaguar must be like. And I could even imagine these gigantic American cars called Pontiacs that I could actually land one of those other previous cars on the hood of. They were so big, but I didn't know that. And this was a wonderful way for me to get in and start connecting. So there's three things I want to kind of talk to about our playing house days. The first thing I want to talk about is imagination play. It's the first kind of play I remember doing. It's making things like we were with the big boxes, but running around the neighborhood, inventing games, building things, kind of playing together, as so many speakers have talked about so far. And it turns out that the imagination that we were using at that time was really informing play. We would use what was in our head to inform our play, right? When you played cops and robbers, if none of the kids talked, it was a really boring game. But you had to say, I'm the bad guy, I'm the good guy, you shot me, no you didn't, I'm going around the other side, you're a cop, blah, blah, blah. And as we played, and as you watch kids play now, they have to talk to each other, don't they? They have to communicate quickly what they're seeing, because while they act it out, they got to tell you what they're doing. Otherwise, it doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? And we lose that in our corporate life. We stop telling each other what we're seeing. We stop telling each other what's on our mind. Well, we got to be PC. And oh, by the way, we get hurt too. What good is a dirt clod fight if you couldn't get hurt? You know? I mean, when the clod comes and hits you in the noggin and it had a stone in it, and you got to run in, and your mom would put a Band-Aid on it, and you got to run out to the other kids, you know, and you had the badge of honor. You had a big welt and a Band-Aid. You know, you could wear that for weeks. You know, that was good stuff. And you know, if Johnny fell out of the tree 2 or 3 times, at least it was funny up to that point. But you know, it turns out that our play has to have this dimension of risk. And in business, what we do is we try to mitigate all risks so that we're good leaders. And we wonder why sometimes our employees are unengaged. We've taken the adventure out. We've taken the risk away. The second thing I want to talk about in Playhouse Play was imagination play. And play connected me to my passion. I was talking about, you know, the Matchbox cars, and I've got one of these in my hands. It's actually this car. It's a 1960s Lotus Formula One car. And you know, I would run around with this thing, and I'd stick it right there so I could see over the cowl, you know, and I could imagine. I made some pretty righteous motor sounds too, I have to tell you, you know, running this thing around the room. But I started bringing narrative to these objects and telling stories to myself about these objects that I was curious about and exploring. And you know, I wanted to be this guy, this guy in this white suit and the white helmet. I wanted to be him. And I won 3 Monacos, by the way, you know, as this guy. My imagination started to inform the objects, and those objects started to inform what I ended up wanting to pursue in my career. The objects that I assigned story to were the ones that came to life in the future for me. The third thing is creative play. You know, I talked about my dad being sort of the art teacher for our school, and I'd run after class, and I like to watch him sort of interact with the students as they were learning to paint and draw, etc. And over in the corner was this incredibly cool, high-tech new tool called a magic marker. I had never seen them before. It was amazing. They smelled good. But one thing I have to tell you is because the Japanese didn't know really how to make a word that would be the same as magic, they just put a big question mark on it, right? So I always thought these were question markers. You know, that's what I thought that they were. And so I would play with these things, and as I would draw, of course, I would draw this. I was trying to figure this out. Why was the engine in the back? Why did the guy sit in the middle? Why weren't there any fenders on this thing? I started to explore these things. And it helped me understand this new world. And magic markers actually ended up coloring that world and helped me study what I couldn't see or what I couldn't be close to for real. Fast forward, 1987, I graduate from school having learned imagination play, having spent my days in passion play, and started to push this idea of creative output. And imagination is one thing, but you have to formalize the expression in your head so that you can share your ideas with others. And in 1987, I graduated from Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, and I learned how to draw with markers. And these were some of my ideas in my portfolio 25 years ago. And I have to say that I was satisfied with what I was learning because I was so excited that I could finally do it. And some of the objects you see up here were from my internship at General Motors, where I got to actually work on a show car. And I finally realized that these drawings could become real, that what was in our head could be transformed into objects, and people could use those objects. The beginning of the boardroom years were really, truly exciting because education from my childhood, education formalized what I learned in my childhood. And the knowledge that I was starting to grow starts growing into an informed perspective. And I began to build competency around these skills and learn how to integrate them. And the more competent I got, the more mastery I built, the more I started running into people with other mastery. My design mastery started meeting people with engineering mastery, and finance mastery, and manufacturing mastery. And mastery plus mastery leads to fantastic opportunities. And I had the fortunate situation of working with so many great people who were truly masters at what they did. The issue with mastery is that over time, many organizations and corporations are designed to promote people if they take responsibility for other people. Mastery is one thing, management is another. And little by little, we start realizing that do we have to set our mastery down in order to manage? Well, Nate, it'd be really great if you could manage other people with mastery instead of being focused on your own. And what happens is, over time, we start realizing that people are actually kind of complicated. Marker renderings are nothing compared to dealing with a group of creatives and people who you're trying to get organized to do something else. Squirrel! Right? And it's difficult. It's one thing if I do that, but they can't do that, right? And so little by little, I start realizing that I'm getting talked out of my passion, that I'm taking the essence of what I really wanted to do and sort of setting it down and putting it down here and sort of looking up to this place where I needed to go. I needed to advance. I needed to change my grade. I wanted to make some more money so that we could buy a house, and I started this process, right, of climbing. I didn't know I was doing it. And by the way, there's no conspiracy. Companies aren't trying to talk you out of being happy. It's our responsibility to understand what's going on. Mastery starts becoming subservient to management. In my case, what happened. And it was very difficult for me to say no. And it was very difficult for me to say, no, I can't get too far away from this or I'm not going to be much good to you, really. And in my process now, as we work with people in town here who are up here. Recently, I had a friend who was attending NewNorth Center. And he said, Nate, I have spent my whole career going to seminars and learning everything my company wanted me to learn. I've spent 25 years there. I've contributed in great ways. I've read all the books. My career is amazing. All the books talk about getting here. But none of the books talk about going there. I mean, this ladder only has steps on one side. What do I do? How do I return to that? How do I get down? So when we look at formal play, the formalizing of our passion, it's a good thing because we want to eventually create value for other people. And when we look at corporate play, I'm not talking about corporations. I'm talking about corporate play working with each other. That in that process, I started realizing that mastery and management had to, at some point, separate. And I wanted to figure out a way to stop that. Because ultimately, the ladder play led me to confusion. Dan Webster, who runs Authentic Leadership in town, puts it this way, that what we want to do is stay in 3 phases. The excitement phase, which is pursuing things. When we pursue things, I want to become a fireman. I want to become a teacher. When we're pursuing things, that's why eBay is so successful. People are pursuing, it's the hunt. People love that. When we're pursuing things, we're good. Fundamentally, when we're learning and growing, when we're pursuing and learning and growing, and then even though we're maybe not Yodas yet, we start teaching. And we start communicating with each other and we start sharing. As long as we're above that line and we're in fundamentally learning and responsible by teaching, then we stay away from the disillusion phase, the tired and withdrawn phase of being bitter, negative, and bored. A company that I worked for about 5 years ago had a saying, our company is a company where you come in, you get so excited, you get a job there, you get really mad, and then you make the decision to stay. And I think about this. I think about how much of this we're really doing. How do we keep our employees out of this stage? We have to get them to renewal. We have to get them to connect with their passion points. We have to tune them up to look ahead and get back to the green. This is so important for the future of our companies. So I did. About 5 years ago, I faced my fear and I got involved again with design. This was an electric car company I worked for in Southern California, and we were trying to design the lowest coefficient of drag, the most aerodynamic electric car we could. And we were on our way till we went out of business 2 weeks ago. But what's important about this is that I relearned this skill. It wasn't magic markers anymore, by the way. This was all done on a computer. This is all digital drawing. The second thing I did was we founded NewNorth Center in town here, where in '09, a group of business people, along with Lakeshore Advantage, decided to create a resource for this area to make sure that as we were coming out of the Great Recession, we could use innovation and creativity as new fuel. And we're happy to say that here in 2012, after our launch in 2010, we've served over 60 companies and 1,000 people. Thank you. Now, what's really scary is I've got alumni in the audience, so yeah. Anyway, it's been a great journey. Look us up at NewNorthCenter.org. Lastly, and most importantly, keep playing. This is my niece's son. Not that I'm encouraging him to go a certain direction, but I did get the pedal car for him. It's exciting. Keep learning. Keep learning. Right now, people are going back to school like they've never gone back to school before. This whole notion of continuous learning is finally getting embedded in the minds of corporations. And this is so important. As individuals, as adults, keep learning. Secondly, keep teaching. Those of you who are near retirement and are thinking of going to Florida or are thinking of going up north, don't do it. Stay here. There are entrepreneurs who need you desperately because you have something they can't buy: wisdom, insight, And if we are going to continue to make our community alive, we have to keep learning, we have to keep teaching, and lastly, of course, we have to keep playing. To me, hey, the best way to do good is get down and act up. Thank you.